We, the jury, do find the defendant, Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey, on the charge of first-degree murder, guilty.
On December 18, 2025, a Maricopa County jury chose the harshest punishment the law allows, death. And the man standing in front of them was Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. Once he had dreamed of becoming a rapper, hoping his name would be known for his music and fame, but instead it became known across Arizona as one of the most feared serial killers in the state's recent history. After hearing every detail of his case, the jurors were convinced his crimes were so cold and so brutal that only the ultimate sentence would do. But what exactly did he do that led them to believe he should pay for that with his life? On December 17, 2017, the Phoenix police responded to a shots-fired call at an apartment complex. They thought it might be just another call on a busy night, but what they found there would blow open a case that had quietly been building for weeks. A string of strange, seemingly random murders had been haunting the Phoenix metro area, and this scene was about to tie them all together. But to understand how it got to that point, we need to go back to where it started, back to November 27, 2017. That evening, two young men sat in a parked car in a Phoenix parking lot. Parker Smith was just 21 years old, and Andrew Remillard was 27. They weren't doing anything wrong, they were just sitting and talking. But someone was watching them. And without warning, gunshots rang out. Both men were hit, and both died right there in that parking lot. It was quick, brutal, and seemingly random. The police arrived to find the two victims slumped in their seats, with no clear motive and no witnesses who saw the shooter. And at that moment, no one realized that this was only the beginning. Because just 5 days later, on December 2nd, 2017, another attack happened. This time, the victim was Salim Richards, a security guard who was walking to his girlfriend's apartment. It was late and Salim was just trying to get home. But he never made it. Someone approached him in the darkness and attacked him without warning. Salim tried to defend himself, but it was too late. He was shot and killed right there on the sidewalk. But when the police found his body, they noticed something important. The gun he carried for work was missing, and so was a necklace he always wore. Whoever killed Salim didn't just murder him, they robbed him too. Over the next 2 weeks, the bodies kept piling up. On December 13th, 29-year-old LaTorri Beckford was shot and killed at an apartment complex in Glendale, and just 3 days later, 21-year-old Christopher Cameron was found dead at another apartment complex, also in Glendale. And on the same day Christopher was found, Maria Villanueva went missing. Maria was 43 years old, a mother of 2 daughters, and she was supposed to meet her boyfriend that evening, but she never showed up. The next day, her body was found in an alley in Phoenix, naked from the waist down. Later, the autopsy report revealed what everyone feared: she had been sexually assaulted before being shot to death. But when investigators processed the evidence, they found something critical: male DNA. And this would later become the key to breaking the case wide open. But before forensics could connect the dots, the killer struck again. And this time, it was personal. On December 17, 2017, around midday, Phoenix police received a call about shots fired at an apartment complex. When officers arrived, they knocked on the door and a man answered. His name was Cleophus Cooksey Jr., and he was 35 years old. He looked calm, almost too calm. But officers immediately noticed something was wrong. There was blood, a lot of it, smeared on his hands, on his clothes, and pooling on the floor near the couch. When officers asked what happened, Cleophus said he had cut his hand and insisted he was the only one home. But his story didn't add up, and the officers could feel it. So they stepped past him and went inside to check for themselves. And what they found was a nightmare. On the floor, lying in pools of blood, were the bodies of 56-year-old Renee Cooksey and 54-year-old Edward Nunn. They had both been shot multiple times. And the worst part, they weren't strangers to Cleophus. Renee was his mother, and Edward was her boyfriend, and Cleophas's stepfather. As officers tried to detain Cleophus, he wasn't planning on surrendering without a fight. According to police reports, he threatened to slit an officer's throat if he came too close. But eventually, he was subdued and taken into custody. And when investigators searched the apartment, they found the evidence they had been looking for all along. On the living room sofa, they found a gun, a 9mm Glock, that didn't belong to Cleophus. It belonged to Salim. Ballistics tests would later confirm that this was the same gun used to kill Latori, Christopher, and Maria. And when detectives searched further, they found Maria's car keys. And guess what they found around Cleophas's neck? Exactly, the necklace that had been stolen from Salim. The pieces were falling into place, and with the help of ballistic technology, investigators were able to link the bullets from all 8 crime scenes. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA on Maria's body matched Cleophas. The stolen gun, the stolen jewelry, the phone records, the witnesses, it all pointed to one person, Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. But who was he? And what led him to these heinous crimes? Cleophas was born on March 25, 1982, in Arizona. He was the grandson of Roy L. Cooksey, a well-known civil rights leader in Tucson. By all accounts, his family had a legacy of community involvement and activism, but Cleophas didn't follow that path. Instead, he followed a very different one. In 2001, when he was just 19 years old, he was involved in an attempted robbery at a topless bar. He was one of 4 men who tried to rob the place, but things went sideways fast. The manager, acting in self-defense, shot and killed one of Cleophas's accomplices. And under Arizona's felony murder law, even though Cleophas didn't pull the trigger, he was held responsible because the death occurred during the commission of a felony. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and armed robbery and was sent to prison. He served his time, and in July 2017, just 4 months before the killing spree began, he was released. After his release, he told his friends and family he wanted to become a rapper. He went by the name King Playbola and posted videos online rapping about street life and his struggles.
I'm above that, baby. I am the one. I am the one.
But before his music career even had the chance to take off, something inside him snapped, and 8 murders followed. There was also a 9th killing that investigators suspected Cleophas of committing, the death of Jesus Real, the 25-year-old brother of Cleophas's ex-girlfriend. Jesus was found shot twice in the face in his bedroom on December 11, 2017, just days after Cleophas and his girlfriend had broken up. But prosecutors ultimately chose not to charge him for that murder. The case was complicated. There were 3 possible witnesses, all of whom were initially arrested for hindering prosecution and tampering with evidence. But those charges were later dropped, and the women disappeared from the case. But without clear evidence and with complications surrounding the investigation, prosecutors decided to focus on the 8 murders they could prove beyond any doubt. After his arrest in December 2017, Cleophas sat in jail for years. His case was delayed again and again, first because of legal motions, then because of the pandemic. Then, in a handwritten letter to a judge in January 2020, Cleophas wrote that he was in an utmost hurry to prove that the charges against him were nothing more than false accusations. He insisted he was not a rapist or a murderer. "I am a music artist," he wrote. He maintained his innocence and demanded a speedy trial. But the delays continued. It wasn't until May 5, 2025, more than 7 years after his arrest, that Cleophas finally went to trial. The prosecution, led by Assistant County Attorney Josh Maxwell, laid out a methodical case built on DNA, ballistics, cell phone data, stolen property, and eyewitness testimony. They presented Salim's gun found in his apartment, his necklace around his neck, and Maria's car keys in his possession. They also showed how the DNA on her body matched his. And finally, they explained how all the bullets came from the same weapon, Salim's stolen Glock. The defense tried to poke holes in the case, but the evidence was simply too strong. And on September 25, 2025, after months of testimony, the jury returned with their final verdict: guilty on all 8 counts of murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, and guilty of attempted sexual assault. Eric Hampton, a friend of Cleophas's mother and stepfather, attended the hearing hoping to see some sign of humanity in the man he had watched grow up. "I thought maybe he had a little heart," he said outside the courthouse. "But he doesn't have any heart at all, to actually do these things to people, and actually the worst part, kill your own mom." But the trial wasn't over. Now came the sentencing phase, where the jury would decide whether he would spend the rest of his life in prison or die for what he had done. The prosecution argued for the death penalty, pointing to the brutality of the crimes, the multiple victims, the sexual assault, the robbery, and the fact that he had killed his own mother and stepfather. They painted a picture of a man who was a danger to society, someone who had shown no mercy and deserved none in return. The defense asked for mercy, though they had little to work with. They presented Cleophas's troubled past, his prior conviction, his struggles after being released from prison. But compared to the horrific nature of the crimes, it was a weak argument. The jury deliberated for days, and on December 18, 2025, they returned with their decision. For 6 of the 8 murder convictions, the jury voted unanimously for death. But for the murders of his mother and his stepfather, the jury was undecided. They could not reach a unanimous decision on those 2 counts. But in the end, this didn't matter. He was sentenced to death. Cleophus Emmanuel Cooksey Jr. was 43 years old when he received his death sentence. He spent only 1.5 years of his adult life outside of prison, and he will never be free again. Arizona has been one of the states willing to use the ultimate punishment, and in 2025, it showed that, once again, 2 men, Aaron Gunches and Richard Jerf, were executed that year. Their deaths marked the first executions after a long stretch of silence in the state. But they were not the end of the story. Because behind them stands a line, 110 men and women, all waiting, all wondering if and when their names will be called. In Arizona, a death sentence does not move quickly. On average, someone sentenced to die waits more than 25 years before anything actually happens. Some wait even longer, nearly half a lifetime, suspended between the crime they committed and the sentence that still hangs over them like a shadow. And no one captures that reality more clearly than one man, Joseph Clarence Smith, Jr. His journey on death row began on August 31, 1977, 48 years ago. Longer than many people watching this have even been alive. Joe was convicted of killing 2 teenage hitchhikers in the 1970s. Today, all these decades later, he is still there, waiting. Joe is now the longest-serving death row inmate in Arizona and the 4th longest-serving inmate of the entire U.S. The only question left is this: how long will Joe and Cleophas sit on death row before the state decides it's their turn to die? What do you think? Has justice been served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.